Chapter 8: The Three States of Consciousness. The boulder on the hillock gave the impression to an onlooker that it had been placed carefully by nature. Sitting on it, one could get a panoramic view of the surroundings. On its east lay the vegetable gardens. It was the cauliflower season. The white flowers with the background of deep, intense green made a pleasing contrast to the eyes. On the south ran a stream meandering shyly, across which the mango trees formed a thick forest, playing host to a variety of birds that chattered incessantly in their multifarious voices. The west was an expanse of cultivated fields that reflected plots of various shades of green depending on the type of crops. The north opened up to more hills with thick forests. It was forenoon, and the warmth of the sun was pleasant to the skin in the cool breeze. Sound of the birds mingled with the gurgle of the stream only added to the silence of the wilderness. Even the voice of the shepherd and the bleats of the sheep helped one to dive deeper into silence. Suddenly, the sound of a flute playing a rustic tune could be heard. Perhaps it was the same shepherd who had started using the bamboo reed instead of his voice. With that, one experienced a sense of being in an expansive auditorium, listening to a 1,000-piece orchestra that intensified the inner silence. A tourist from a metropolis was on his way to a lesser-known hill station. The bus had started negotiating the steep hill and its axle broke down. It had to be parked on one side and all the passengers were asked to get down. The tourist, realizing that it would take quite a while, climbed the slope and chose the vantage point on the shoulder of the mountain so that he could have a look at the valley below. Sitting there, he realized that his fatigue of the travel so far was dissolving into the quietude of the surroundings. He beheld the wide expanse and the distant horizon that spread out in front. The quiet little sounds of nature had a soothing effect on his mind, which responded in kind. After a while, the mobile phone disturbed him out of his reverie. Spontaneously, he responded. It was his friend and colleague calling from his office, briefing him about a problem which had come up. No, the friend had assured, it was not necessary for him to disturb the peace and holiday over it, and that he could handle it on his own. It was only to brief him up that he had called and to wish him a happy retreat, since they had not met before parting. And so the conversation continued. Though the friend had observed that the problem was not worth losing one's peace and holiday over, he had disturbed the peace, and now onwards tourists had metamorphosed into a business executive. Throughout his so-called vacation, he had been in the hill station only physically, while his mind had rushed back to his business. The mobile phone had acted as a mediator to extract periodic reports on the existing as well as non-existing problems. The peace he had felt on his way was totally lost to him. The beauty and the fulfillment experienced amidst nature had been replaced by the noise of his mind, and metaphorically, the metropolis had arrived at the hill station. In this sense, the city dweller, in spite of his taste for a quiet life, is unable to enjoy it due to his habitual involvement with either mental or physical activity. The goad for this activity is desire, which is nothing but the mental orientation towards future. A poet was forced to sit in his father's shop. The father was keen that the son should learn the tricks of the trade when he is alive. Being a businessman, he knew very well that poetry can never feed a hungry stomach or look after the needs of survival. One afternoon, when the father was resting after his midday meal, the son was sitting on the counter. But as and when any customer came, the son sent him away to the next shop without using his voice by just through his fingers or gestures. When the father came to know of this action, he asked his son the reason for his strange behavior. The son just shrugged his shoulders and observed that the poem was waiting to manifest and the customers were disturbing him. Philosophers, thinkers, or artists live on the inner plane of introversion. They are living in the level of mental imagination. Such persons are dreamers, living on the plane of what should be, or what ought to be, or what could be. In other words, they live in the past because all their vision is colored by the past experiences. The imagination may not be the same, but is based on the improved past experiences. A villager waiting for monsoon or a laborer for his work takes no notice of the quiet surroundings, which is so highly appreciated by a person living in a city. He never feels the freshness of the non-polluted air or the bountiful nature that literally overwhelms him. He does not have anything to complain, nor does he have any reason for any special happiness. Whether he gets something to look after his family or not, he has no woes. The only disturbance he experiences is when there is a break in his sleep. His lethargy does not allow him to have any taste for either the poise of the surroundings or the excitement of the activity of city dwellers. It appears as though the contemporary times have taken away all finer feelings from life. Human beings have ceased to be men with capital M, as Swami Vivekananda used to say, to become more and more self-centered and petty. All that matters to them is to achieve the individual goals, even at the expense of the collective and social goals. Everywhere we see people who adopt shortcuts or not so lawful means are being respected or even feared just because they have better material acquisition than others. This respect and fear from the fellow members of the society has made the corrupt fearless and knave. The price man has to pay is his awareness, which goes on reducing with the increase of selfishness and pettiness. The Rishis made a wonderful observation that the cause of selfishness and all its progenies like fear, suspicion, greed, etc., is the lack of awareness. It is like a person in search of the exit hitting his head against a wall in a dark room. The darkness and his inability to see are the reasons why he hurts himself and others. The city dweller, the poet, and the villager represent three phases of existence. Most of us, if not all, go through these different phases of poise, activity, and lethargy by turns. We dwell on past and future and only for brief moments of time and pass through the present as a flash, just as we use a corridor to go from one room to another. The orientation of time is also linked with the states of consciousness of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Our mental orientation during these states of mind was very carefully observed by our rishis thousands of years back. Their observations and discoveries give us the means and methods for being in here now, helping us lead a saner and a total life. It will not be an exaggeration if one said that The bed on which the river of Upanishadic wisdom flows is Prajnanam or awareness. Each Upanishad gives its own approach for evoking, nurturing, and enhancing this awareness by considering a facet or aspect of existence. In so doing, it not only analyzes the particular facet or aspect, but also suggests a method for developing the awareness. One of the methods has been called as Avasthatraya Viveka, or discrimination of the three states of consciousness given in a profound Upanishad called as the Mandukya Upanishad. In Sanskrit, the frog is called Mandukaha, Mandayati Varsha Samaye, means one which manifests during rainy season. The biologists have observed that frogs hibernate most of the time and come out intermittently with the outbreak of regular monsoons or even a casual rain. This observation was perhaps one of the reasons for naming this Upanishad as Mandukya Upanishad. The process of hibernation may have been seen by the Rishi as the process of tapas or introspection and the involvement as rain. So it is likely that the croaks of the frogs were taken to be the declarations of the truth, though rather harsh, warning us of the consequences of involvement. The Rishis discovered the primary cause of ignorance to be what they called as Bheda Vasana, the tendency to differentiate. This tendency is so deep that it can be seen even in our day-to-day life. Religion to most of us is different from our secular life, which occupies us most of the time. Consequently, religion is either restricted to a Sunday or a Friday, or for a short period of time, maybe half an hour or at the most 1 hour daily. The rest of the week or the day, our activity is totally unconnected with our religious practice. Such bifurcation of secular and religious or spiritual life is the reason for our confusion and mental conflicts. They observed that everything and every thought affects our awareness. They were very careful not to leave out any experience or state of consciousness from their observation. Early in their investigation, they found that the three states of waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep had to be observed if their investigation had to succeed. Psychology had mostly observed its waking state till the end of the 19th century. It was given to Sigmund Freud and his friends like Carl Gustav Jung to discover the subconscious and unconscious. During his encounters with the mentally disturbed patients, Freud noticed that their dreams helped him to diagnose their problems. Because in dreams, he noted, all of us are honest and never wear any masks. They tell us of our hidden desires, emotions, and ambitions. Freud's book Interpretation of Dreams in 1899 attempted to throw light on this state of consciousness. Only in the past 55 odd years has something been done on deep or dreamless sleep. The Rishis, however, had almost succeeded in mapping the psychic vista when they had not only recognized its various functional facets, but also analyzed its three states of consciousness. In this sense, through near complete investigations on mind, they had more than succeeded in understanding the nature of mind than helping them to have a total control over the activity of mind. With very bold strokes, they complete the consciousness scape in just 12 mantras. The first mantra says, Sarvam Hyetat Brahma Ayamatma Brahma soyamatma chatushpat. All this is verily Brahman. The self is Brahman. The self, such as it is, has 4 quarters. The Rishi, in tune with his own experience, accepts everything as Brahman, a friendly caution against the habit of division. At the same time, for those who haven't experienced the oneness, he compassionately comes down to their level and gives out certain details comprehensible to them by adopting the technique of known to unknown. The 3 states are parts of our daily experience. First and the most obvious quarter is the wakeful state, which is called as Jagrat in Vedanta. Jagaritastano bahish prajnah saptangah ekoni vimshatimukha stulabhuk vaishvanarah prathama padaha. The first quarter is Vaishvanaraha, whose sphere of action is the waking state, whose consciousness relates to things external, is possessed of 7 limbs and 19 mouths, and enjoys the gross things. The waking state is characterized by its externalization of the consciousness. It gets related to the external sense objects like the sound, form, taste, smell, and touch. We transact with the external world of objects through senses. Thus, the senses mediate our transaction and the knowledge is indirect. The Rishi says that it has 7 limbs and 19 mouths. Acharya Shankara, in his commentary, tries to explain the mantra with the help of symbolism as quoted in another Upanishad, the Chandogya Upanishad. He has 7 limbs. Heaven is verily the head of that Vaishvanara self. The sun is his eye, air his vital force, space is his middle part, water is his bladder, and earth his 2 feet. Avahaniya fire has been imagined as his mouth. He that is possessed of these 7 limbs is Saptangaha. Similarly, he is possessed of 19 mouths, the 5 senses of perception and 5 organs of action make up 10. The vital forces, prana and the rest, make up 5, and there are manas, buddhi, ahankara and chittam. These are mouths, since they are comparable to mouths as they are gates of perception. Since through these entrances Vaishvanaraha enjoys gross objects, sound and the rest, he is called as Vaishvanaraha, as he leads in diverse ways all Vishwa beings, Naraha, to their experience. The Rishis had the experiential conviction that the micro and the macrocosmos are intimately connected. Moreover, the microcosm is the macrocosm in miniature. For the transaction with the world of objects, certain things are mandatory. Limbs are necessary for activity, which include the head, thought, eyes, form or sun, ears, the directions, speech, the wisdom, lungs, the air, heart, the feelings, and feet or physical movement. The 19 instruments are called as mouths as we use them to experience the external world. They are 10 instruments of knowledge and action, 5 pranas or vital forces, and manas, buddhi, chittam and ahankara. Sarvasara Upanishad calls the limbs as the energies of the sun and other gods. It says, Mana adi chaturdashakaranaih pushkalaihi adityadyanugrahitaihi shabdadin vishayan stulanya dopalabhate tadatmano jagaranam. The state in which the soul, with the help of the energies of the sun and other gods, and through the instrumentality of these 14 mind, intellect, mind stuff, and ego, and the 10 sense organs becomes sensitive to sound, touch, and other gross objects, is called the waking state. Experience attained through the instrumentality of either the energies or the senses is mediate and hence indirect, because the senses are governed by the likes and dislikes as well as the attitude and aptitude of the experience. The information thus brought by the senses as mediators is only an interpretation and not as it is. Thus, senses are not just passive reporters but receptors, but are positive or negative interpreters. Such imposed interpretation creates an illusory world around every consciousness, and everyone begins to live in one's own world. This personal interpretation has been termed as the Maya, as it is an individual creation. In this sense, there are differences due to the differences in perception and interpretations, in spite of the commonness that is experienced by all of us. Though an object, say a mountain, is perceived as mountain by all of us, it is beautiful or otherwise, pleasing or otherwise, and so on, depending on the individual interpretation. This fact has been accepted by the scientific community. A question arises as to how this commonness is effected amidst such diverse subjectivity. This is clarified by bringing in the concept of Vaishvanaraha, which means either universal person or the universe of persons. There exists what can be termed as a collective mind, which is common to all of us. Jung, in the early part of 20th century, in a study of the unconscious, discovered what he termed as the collective unconscious, which is common not to humanity but to all existence itself. It comprises of all the experience of the existence during its long and tedious process of evolution. Thus, the mind is not only the mind of an individual, but the existence itself. It is the memory gathered during the millions of years of evolution. Each individual cell has a mind of its own as far as its functions and reactions are concerned. It is said that if we gather all the information inherent in all the systems in the body, including the brain, it cannot be contained even in the largest library. This memory of the experiences is the one which gives commonness to our perceptions and views. This has been accepted by the science of physiology. While describing the structure and functions of the brain, Carl Sagan makes a very interesting observation in his famous book, Cosmos. Like all our organs, the brain has evolved increasing in complexity and information content over millions of years. Its structure reflects all the stages through which it has passed. The brain evolved from inside out. Deep inside is the oldest part, the brainstem, which conducts the basic biological functions, including the rhythm of life, heartbeat, and respiration. Capping the brainstem is the R complex, the seat of aggression, ritual, territoriality, and sexual hierarchy, which evolved hundreds of millions of years ago in our reptilian ancestors. Deep inside the skull of every one of us, there is something like a brain of a crocodile. Surrounding the R complex is the limbic system, or the mammalian brain, which evolved millions of years ago in our ancestors who were mammals but not yet primates. It's a major source of our moods and emotions, of our concern and care for the young. And finally, on the outside, living in uneasy truce with the more primitive brains beneath, is the cerebral cortex, which evolved millions of years ago in our primate ancestors. The cerebral cortex, where matter is transformed into consciousness, is the point of embarkation for all our cosmic voyages. Comprising more than two-thirds of the brain mass, it is the realm of both intuition and critical analysis. It is here that we have ideas and inspiration, here that we read and write, here that we learn mathematics and compose music. Cortex regulates our conscious lives. It is the distinction of our species, the seat of our humanity. Civilization is a product of the cerebral cortex. This fact was known to our rishis as they introduced the concept of Vaishvanaraha, that envelops all individual beings into one organic whole. Though at the material level, each being is an individual, at the levels of mind and other subtler faculties, it is not. It is like the individual lamps, incandescent or fluorescent, having their common sources of energy in distant power stations. So, the wakeful state of consciousness is a complex union of the individual and the universal. This particular thought is repeated in different Upanishads through different examples with the specific purpose constantly reminding the seekers that they should learn the art of seeing the one behind the many. The second state of consciousness is the dream state, of which we all are familiar. Dreaming is a substitute or secondary state that is deeper than the wakeful state. Of this state, the Upanishad says, Swapnasthano antah prajnah saptanga ekoni vimshati mukha pravivikta bhuk taijaso dvitiya padaha. Taijasa is the second quarter, with the sphere of activity as the dream state, whose consciousness is internal, who has 7 limbs and 19 mouths, enjoying the subtle objects. Though the dream state is subtler, it acts like a bridge between the waking state, that is external, and the deep sleep state, which is internal. Whatever experience has been left unfinished or the desire unfulfilled is completed in the dream state. When Freud started dealing with mentally disturbed people, he was struck by the fact that their dreams revealed more than their wakeful experiences. In wakeful state, our transactions are mostly incomplete. They are taken up and completed in the dream state. Sarvasaropanishad puts it eloquently. Tadvasanarahita chaturbhihi karanaihi shabdyadya bhavopi vasanamayanta shabdadin yadopalabhate tadatmanah swapnam. When the living being, on account of the unfulfilled desires of the wakeful state, becomes sensitive to sound, touch and other gross objects, even in the absence of the object, it is called as the dream state of the self. Mind always completes its unfinished transactions, either in the dream state or during the daydreaming. An incomplete discussion or an argument is sought after by the mind, and it is our common experience that we go on talking to that person in the mind. Actually, the dreams form a very important, if not the most important, part of our existence. The dreams are always flowing as an undercurrent during all our activity or inactivity. It may be more or less according to our nature and the priorities we keep. They are like the stars that apparently disappear in the sunlight but which actually continue to populate the skies. This is very obvious from our day to day experience. The moment external things or acts cease to hold our attention, the undercurrent of dreams becomes more explicit. In fact, to move away from the problems, our natural choice is to dream, as motion pictures help in diverting our attention from the day to day problems. The people of the film industry have been called as the dream merchants. Just as the motion pictures are nothing but the play of light and shadow on a blank screen, dreams are without any material substance projected on the screen of imagination in the theatres of our mind. Prashnopanishad explains it succinctly. अत्रैष देवः स्वप्ने महिमानमनुभवति यद्दृष्टं दृष्टमनुपश्यति श्रुतं श्रुतमेवार्थमनुशृणोति देशादिगन्तरैश्च प्रत्यनुभूतं पुनः पुनः प्रत्यनुभवति दृष्टं चादृष्टं च श्रुतं चाश्रुतं चानुभूतं चानुभूतं च सच्चासच्च सर्वं पश्यति. In this dream state, this deity, the mind, experiences greatness. Whatever was seen, it sees again. Whatever was heard, it hears again. Whatever was perceived in the different places and directions, it experiences again and again. It perceives all by becoming all that was seen or not seen, heard or not heard, perceived or not perceived, and whatever is real or unreal. During the dream state, since the social or moral controller is absent, it is unrestrained and uncensored. But then, the whole world that is perceived is only a mental projection without any material substance. It has been called by Mandukya Upanishad as Taijasa or luminous. Explaining this, Shankaracharya says, he is called Taijasa since he becomes the witness of the modes of cognition that is bereft of objects and appears only as a luminous thing. The state of dreaming is without the instrumentality of the senses, and one is not aware of the external or the objective world. The world, or rather the worlds, however, are created by the mind through the accumulated impressions of the objective experiences, not only of the present life, but of all the lives one has lived, not only of the human lives, but of the vegetables as well as animal lives. Thus one can dream of being a tree or a lion. Such unbounding of the past memories shows that not only the impression of the past lives has been preserved, but those lives have not been lived totally and always partially. We have now not loved totally, not been angry totally, not done anything totally. These so many incomplete transactions inside create a milieu of dreaming. Dreaming creates a kind of smoke around our eyes. It forms a vicious circle. Dreaming stops us from living the life totally, and our failure to lead a total life creates more dreams. As we are too occupied with dreams, we are unable to lead a complete life. The moment we start living totally, from moment to moment, dreaming ceases. Thus, an enlightened person is the one for whom the dreams have stopped. A dreaming mind can never know the truth, neither of the material world nor of the ultimate truth, as it lives in the self created illusory worlds. There is only one way of stopping the continuous dream film that goes on in our subconscious, that is, to transcend the desires. That is the reason why all spiritual literature stresses on stopping all desires, because when we desire, we give fuel to our dreams. Desire always stresses on becoming in terms of future. Desires are the dreams originating in the past, overlapping into the future. They are the projections of our reformed past into the future. Dreaming can never be in the present. To be in the present and to be in a dream is impossible, they can never meet. Dreams are our unfulfilled desires. To stop desires, we have to stop all attachment. Spirituality advocates the principle of being in here now, as desires or dreams cannot exist in the present. If one is aware and attentive of the time at present, as here now, dreaming stops totally. J. Krishnamurti used to give a technique of being in the here and now by observing the origin of thought, its rising and its completion. This gives totality to the thought, at the same time the skill of non-involvement. Both the wakeful state and the dream state overlap into each other, and that is how the Upanishad observes that both have 7 limbs and 19 mouths. While the wakeful state perceives the external objects, the dream state perceives the internal objects created out of the impressions and memory. Normally, most of us do not have any control over both these states, and after sheer exhaustion, we drop into the third state of Sushupti, or the deep sleep. Without this state, there is every likelihood of our losing sanity. It is this state of Sushupti which gives the much needed rest to the mind. Describing this state, Mandukyopanishad says, Yatra sukto na kanchana kamam kamayate, na kanchana swapnam pashyati tat sushuptam. Sushuptasthana eki bhutah, prajnana ghanaha, evanandamayo hyananda bhukt cheto mukha, prajnas tritiya padaha. That state of deep sleep, where the sleeper neither desires any enjoyable object nor sees any dream. The third quarter is the prajna, who has deep sleep as a sphere, in whom everything becomes undifferentiated, who is a mass of consciousness abounding in bliss, who is surely an enjoyer of bliss and is the doorway to the experience of dream and the waking states. The above mantra gives profound observations which, if understood experientially, offer lasting solutions to all our so-called problems in life. Sushupti, like many of the Vedantic terms, really does not have any equivalent in English. To distinguish from the ordinary sleep, the word deep is added, and yet the translation remains incomplete. The mantra under discussion gives its characteristics. In this state, both the perception of the material objects and the objects created by the unfulfilled desires or the incomplete impressions has ceased. It says that the sleeper does not desire any material sense object, nor does he see any dream. Through this observation, it throws some insights. The sense perception, the desire, as well as the dream are very intimately connected. Our sense perception and dreams are influenced by desires, and except for the materiality of the objects of perception, both wakeful and the dream states are similar. In the wakeful state, the attention is on the material objects, while in dream, it is on thoughts, imaginations about the material objects. The state of Sushupti is devoid of any attention. The mantra uses the word Prajnana Ghanaha, or undifferentiated mass of consciousness, not directed at anything, for describing the absence of attention. When there is no attention, there can be no intelligence. Shankaracharya gives the analogy of darkness of night. It is mass of undifferentiated consciousness, like everything appears as a mass by becoming indistinguishable under the cover of nocturnal darkness. It also says that prajna, meaning consciousness, enjoys the bliss. Our common experience says that the dreamless sleep brings happiness and freshness, which is absent if it is full of dreams. However, we should not take the word Ananda to be the ultimate state, for the real Ananda is characterized by total attention and hence is intelligence itself. The mantra therefore adds that Sushupti is the doorway to the experience of dream and wakeful state, which means that though it lacks any attention, there is a tendency to attend the mental activity as hinted by the word Cheto Mukha. This is also confirmed by our day-to-day experience. Even after the deep, dreamless sleep, when we get up, the mind gets crowded by thoughts and desires. Shankaracharya clarifies in his commentary, he is full of joy. His abundance of joy is being caused by the absence of the misery involved in the effort of the mind vibrating as objects and their experiencer. But he is not bliss itself, since joy is not absolute. Just as in common parlance, one remaining free from effort is said to be happy, an enjoyer of joy, so this one too is called Ananda Bhuk. The vibrations of sense and mind are tiresome, and when they cease, there is relief and hence happiness. The non-vibration of senses in presence of their objects is in Sushupti is confirmed by Sarvasara Upanishad as it describes the deep sleep state. Chaturdasha karano paramatvi shesha vijnana bhavadyada tadatmana sushuptam. The sleeping state is one in which all the 14 organs are still and tranquil, and when, for the lack of real knowledge, the self is insensitive to sound, touch, and other objects. Normally, consciousness is a single tipped arrow. We are conscious of or about something that is outside us. Consciousness is always objective, and if there is nothing in front of us, neither the material object nor the thought of the object, we lose consciousness. When there is no object to be known, the knower is lost and there is unconsciousness. It means that we are not conscious really, we are only objectively conscious. We have never known ourselves but known only the objects and things. Thus, our consciousness is other oriented. It is always outgoing. It exists only when an outside object or thought about the object is present. Sushupti is unconscious state, as there are neither sense objects nor the dreams, which are nothing but the images of the experiences in the past. When there is no object as a challenge, one becomes unconscious. The states of wakefulness, dream and deep sleep have one thing in common: the attention is never on the self. In the wakeful state, the attention is on the sense objects. In the dream, the attention is on the thought or the reflection of the sense experiences in the form of recollection of incomplete desires. In the deep sleep state, it is neither on the objects nor on the thoughts, as the attention is absent, due to which there is unconsciousness. Thus, the three states of consciousness of which we are familiar, in reality are the three states of unconsciousness, as we are not aware of the entity which is experiencing these states, because we always require an object to be conscious. This so-called consciousness is a struggle between stimulus and response. We are being forced to be conscious by the external objects and the inner thoughts. Without their stimulus, sleep would be a very spontaneous act. There is a constant tension between us and the world, between us and our thoughts. Is there then no scope for us to become conscious of our inner self, who is conscious? The Upanishad gives us a very encouraging observation, almost like a pat on the back. It says, Esha Sarveshwaraha, Esha Sarvajnaha, Eshontariamihi, Esha Yoni Sarvasya, Prabhavapyayohi Bhutanam. The state of Sushupti is the Lord of all. This one is omniscient. This one is the inner director of all. This one is the source of all. This one is verily the place of origin and dissolution of all beings. We cannot become aware of the pure ocean unless and until the waves cease, due to our being aware of only the constant dance and the movement of the waves. When the waves drop, and in that stillness, we lose our consciousness. The mantra says that Sushupti, or the quietness of the vibration of perception and dreams, is the substratum of the world, both wakeful and dream. This observation is obvious to most of us, as we habitually get involved with desires or dreams the moment we come out of Sushupti. Through this statement, it suggests that instead of allowing oneself to fall unconscious, one can become aware of the quietness of the ocean. Instead of allowing the mind to create world through involvement with the world of dreams and indulgence with objects, one can try to become aware of the one who dreams or perceives the objects. There is full freedom to either fall into unconsciousness, of mechanicalness, of wakeful and dream states, or rise to consciousness through awareness. Hinting at this, Gaudapada, in his glorious Karika or gloss on the Upanishad, says, Bahishpradnyo Vibhurvishvo Hyanta Prajnastu Taijasa Ghana Prajnas Tatha Prajna Eka Eva Tridha Smrita. Beautiful. Vishwa experiences the external things and is all pervading. Taijasa experiences the internal things. Similarly, Prajna is a mass of unconsciousness. It is the same entity that is thought of in three ways. Whatever is dealt in our Upanishads is totally connected with our daily experience. Just as we remember sense experiences during the wakeful state, we also remember our dreams. Though we are unconscious during our deep sleep state, when we get up, we invariably exclaim that we had a good rest during the sleep. In his explanatory commentary on the gloss, Shankaracharya clarifies the transcendence of the three states by the self, its unity, purity, and not being related to anything are proved by the fact of its existence in the three states in succession and of its being interlinked by memory as I. Heavy clouds cover the crystal clear azure sky. Our so-called normal consciousness is like our noticing the clouds and not the sky which holds them. The clouds move, but the sky is always still. The clouds of sense objects, thoughts and unconsciousness get imposed on the clear sky of something that is still, call it I, Sakshi or witness. Being unaware of this entity, we are bound to get disturbed by the clouds of objects, desires and unconsciousness. Transcending the three states and being in the non-moving principle is what is taught by the Upanishad. Richard Bach, in his book Illusion, puts it beautifully. A cloud does not know why it moves in just such a direction and at such a speed. It feels an impulsion, this place to go now. But the sky knows the reasons and the patterns behind all clouds, and you will know too when you lift yourself high enough to see beyond horizons. Mandukya Upanishad teaches us the technique of seeing beyond the horizons.